You are watching Frankly Speaking Sports, live from Charlotte, North Carolina. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another College Football Tuesday. I'm your host, Larry Frank, live with Zach Mckinnell of the Blue Bloods. And ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest that'll be joining us in about 20-25 minutes, Ray Sherman, who's coached in the NFL, coached in college football. Zach, 4 decades of coaching experience. What a great interview that is going to be. But, you know, every single week, Zach, we never seem to be surprised what happens in college football. And a couple of things that I think were clarified for us this weekend with where should some of these teams be. You know, Notre Dame losing, which we both thought that would happen. But I think if I look at the top 25 and I go through everything that happened over the weekend, I think one of the most impressive things was I think Georgia solidified itself as a playoff caliber championship team.
Yeah, I don't think you could make any argument against that. I mean, they dominated that game from kickoff until that clock hit zero. They absolutely, they won this game by 37 points and didn't allow Arkansas to put anything on, like not even to get to the end zone or really even the red zone all game long. This defense is just different, man. Keely Ringo at corner and the opposite of him, De'Aaron Kendrick, have played outstanding. Ringo's only allowed 1 catch this whole season as their starting corner, which is just an elite production. And not only that, they won 37-0 with their backup quarterback.
Yeah, and you know what, Zach? He didn't have to throw the ball because they were running so much. Well, they had 273 yards rushing between 4 different guys on that team.
Yeah, and they had a 4-back system with Cook, with Zeus and Zamir White and Kendall Milton, a 5-star running back. They just have so much talent. Kenny McIntosh even got in on the action. If Georgia's able to do that and keep the pressure off their quarterback, it's going to be huge for them. And then just think about how scary this is when they get Darnell Washington back, when they get George Pickens back, when they get Tyke Smith back, when they get Kearis Jackson back. And they even have offensive linemen who got hurt. So you're looking at a team right now, Frank, that's operating at about 75% of what it could be in terms of talent missing from that team. Because if you remember at the beginning of the season, they were missing like their 4 top wide receivers from this team to start the season. And you're looking at a defense that's giving up 110 yards passing per game. They're giving up 4.6 points per game, and they have 2 top 10 wins on their resume. This is the pace that they're on. They have a chance to go down as arguably a top 5 defense in college football history, which really takes the pressure off of the quarterback situation. And when JT Daniels gets back at quarterback, which it could be this weekend, this team, the potential's through the roof. And for me, this weekend solidified right now. I would take Georgia over Alabama as the best team in the country after this weekend.
And I agree with you. I was just about to say that. You just beat me to the punch. But also realize in this game, you talk about this defense, they only gave up, I think, like 162 yards of total offense to an Arkansas team that has had its way so far this year, pretty much running the ball. They held Jefferson, which that part did not surprise me. It was how well were they going to contain this running game. But one of the things that you and I have seen since the beginning of the season, since they played Clemson, we knew about the defense. We knew the defense was going to be good. But their offense, very slowly, week to week to week, you see it progressing. And yes, their backups in now. But what a great, great game plan. You got to give Kirby Smart some credit here for being able to limit how much Bennett really needed to be involved in this game from a standpoint of making things happen. When you're causing turnovers and, getting the ball back and just handing it off, it's a formula for success. But another thing in this game, a lot of people don't realize, especially in college football, and we've seen it all year long, give credit to the special teams for Georgia. 3 for 3 on field goals. Sponsley had 3 for 3, and I think he was 4 for 4 on extra points. But, you're talking right there, 13 points out of your kicker, which makes a big, big difference when you know you have a kicker you can count on.
And they got a block punt for a touchdown as well.
Yep.
In the first half. So everything went right for Georgia. And I think personally, looking at the linebacking unit led by Nakobe Dean, you have an argument right now that Nakobe Dean has solidified himself as arguably the best player in college football right now. That's the elite level production that you've been with middle linebackers. And I said after the Clemson game, he solidified himself as the best linebacker, but right now you're arguing. I think you're gonna have a tough time finding a better defensive football player in the country right now than Nakobe Dean for the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah, and you also understand that. I mean, this is amazing. Listen to this: Arkansas in the whole game. Okay, just to put it in perspective, Georgia had 23 first downs in the game. Arkansas had only 9 first downs. But let's also, discredit something that happened in this game. You're not going to win when you have 13 penalties for 101 yards like Arkansas did. But no discredit towards Georgia. Week in, week out, this team is showing us that right now, like you said earlier, they're the team to beat right now. Don't get me wrong, Alabama's good. We'll talk about them in a little bit. But as far as strength, I don't see a better defense out there than Georgia has put together.
No, them and Iowa have really separated themselves as the top 2 defenses in the country, in my opinion. And right now, I don't think there's a close number 2 to the Georgia Bulldogs right now. I mean, they're just playing that good. And they have another ranked road matchup this weekend against Auburn, where if they can make a statement this weekend, you're looking at like, man, who in the world can score on this Georgia defense? And I don't know if they're going to find a real test until they find Alabama in the SEC championship weeks down the line.
Yeah, and as we skip to the next game, Cincinnati, Notre Dame, you and I both said this would probably happen. And, some people say, well, Larry, you've been saying all year that Notre Dame was going to lose. You had to be right one of these times. But, something about this game, and I got to give Riddler a lot of credit for Cincinnati. We talked about him last week on our show. But also, this game was not as close as the score really indicates. There was talk about field goals, 2 missed field goals by Cincinnati that could have swayed this game even more, a bigger spread than it was. But give Cincinnati credit. They come in, they stop Notre Dame, and they come out as 5-0 team. And now they're ranked number 5, I believe, in the latest AP poll. Iowa's ahead of them. And, we can argue that, but Iowa's a good team. You got to, but Cincinnati has really put themselves in a position right now to make a run for a playoff spot.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at the first group of 5 team to have a top 10 win on their resume on the road. And they did a great job this weekend. Ritter did exactly what he had to do. The running game was solid. The defense was lights out, just like always. The secondary is one of the most underrated units in the country. Ahmad Garner gets a big pick in the red zone. And if it really wasn't for a strip sack by Notre Dame that was taken back into the red zone, this game could have got completely out of hand because that strip sack happened as Cincinnati was driving into Notre Dame territory. So like you said, it was a much more impressive win than the score might indicate. And I think you got to give Cincinnati all the credit in the world. Luke Fickell had those guys ready to play. They played solid on the defensive side of the ball. They were able to get to the quarterback, pressure him, and they were able to shut down the run game of a very talented running back in Kyron Williams, made him a non-factor. For me, the difference between Cincinnati and these other group of 5 teams that have made these runs is they're complete on both sides of the ball. When you look at them, there's really not an obvious weakness on this team where you're like, yeah, they're going to get destroyed in the playoffs. They got the quarterback that can go make plays. He has experience. He's also the winningest quarterback in college football right now, with more than 10 games played. He's 34-5, I believe. And on top of that, they got a running back from Alabama. They got the wide receivers, the tight end, the offensive line stout. The defensive line headlined by Myjai Sanders and Javon Briggs is outstanding. Ahmad Gardner might be the best corner in the country. They got talent everywhere. And so for me, they're a group of 5 team. They're a Power 5 team masquerading as a group of 5 team. And I think they're going to make some noise down the stretch. And like you said, all they have to do is win convincingly and win week in and week out, and let the cards fall where they may, and you should be able to find yourself in the playoffs, especially because we have number 3 and number 4 playing this weekend. Cincinnati is going to be in the top 4 if they beat Temple on Friday night by Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, and it's a game, and we're careful how we say it, because we've seen what's happened this year. But you talk about that defense, not only did it create 3 turnovers in that game, you talked about the rushing game, how they contained that rushing game at Notre Dame, held them to a total of 84 yards. I mean, you do that with that offense and you balance it with that defense, and like you said, and like we both said, 24-13 does not really indicate how bad Notre Dame played in that game or how good Cincinnati played in that game. Cincinnati had that game in control from the beginning. We move over to a game that, stunned a couple of people here. Stanford versus Oregon. And when you look at this game, when I got to look at this game and some of the highlights, Zach, this was an ugly game. It was an ugly game. 20 penalties in this game, 10 by each team. Got to give Tanner McKee. I mean, this was a game that Oregon led. I don't know. I think I'm allergic to you or something. But this is at the end of the game. I believe he had a touchdown pass. Right at the end, there was a penalty, I believe. At the end of regulation, he got another chance. They scored a touchdown, and he was banged up all day long, McGee. Then he comes back the first possession of overtime and connects. I mean, he threw for 230 yards and 3 touchdowns. Stanford was ahead. I'm sorry, Oregon was ahead, I believe. Stanford was ahead 17-7. Then Oregon came back, took a 24-17 lead, and then the rest of that happened. But when you looked at this, Oregon rushed for 228 yards, 414 total yards. You look at the box score and you're like, Stanford won? And yes, Stanford won, but you got to give McGee some credit for the heroics at the end of that game. But an ugly game.
Yeah, and there were also a lot of questionable calls in that game. The targeting call on Thibodeau on the last drive extended the drive for Stanford to tie the game. And then they had just in my opinion, it was an outrageous pass interfering defensive holding call in the end zone that would have ended the game. Really and truly, I usually don't say a team got robbed because there was other factors, but Oregon got robbed in this one. That the refs calling at the end was completely ridiculous, and you could just tell because when it was the same thing that happened with Miami, Ohio State in 2002 in the Natty. Miami thinks they win. They get a late pass interference call, and the complete error is taken out of the team, and they lose in overtime. The same thing happened here. Oregon went from thinking they won the game to now having to get up for an overtime game, and they just couldn't match it. I think they started out very slow, and that cost them the game. But for me, overall, I think Stanford's an underrated team, especially now that they've made the quarterback change to McKee. And so for me, Oregon just got caught overlooking their opponent, starting slow, and it cost them in the long run. And that's the story of the Pac-12, man. You can be beat any given Saturday in the Pac-12.
And, shame on Oregon for giving them a chance down there before the penalty. You can say what you want, and you're right. The timing and everything plays into the factor of that game. But that's a game that Oregon should have won, but they didn't win. And at the end of the day, like you said, we're finding out there that those guys all know how to play football out there. And, we just saw UCLA get beat by, what was it? Somebody last weekend, huge. Yeah. They got beat. You just don't know out there anymore who is good, and on any given day, anybody can win. But a team that you and I know is good, and they've been good, and they continue to be good, is that Alabama ball club. And what I was looking forward to, let me tell you, I was looking forward to see Matt Corral, who I thought did pretty well, play against Bryce Young. But somebody told Brian Robinson to eat his Wheaties that morning, because I'll tell you what the heck broke loose? 171 yards, 4 touchdowns in that game. Alabama outrushed Mississippi 210 to 78 yards. Total yards 451 to 291. Just a well-balanced win for Nick Saban and the Alabama Crimson Tide.
Absolutely. And it's even scarier because you saw what the potential of this Alabama team could be if they get the run game going. If they could take the pressure off of Bryce Young, that offense flows so perfectly, and they're so hard to stop. And that defense had one of their better performances of the season. I mean, this game was 42-7 before Ole Miss moved the ball late to kind of make the score look reasonable. Alabama dominated this game at the line of scrimmages. The defensive line dominated the Ole Miss offensive line. They were getting to Corral. They were keeping them in 3rd and longs. And also the offensive line did a great job of controlling the line of scrimmage, getting to the second level, and allowing Brian Robinson to go make plays. For me, Alabama proved that they're a complete team, and that really and truly there's, in my opinion right now, there's only one team in the country that can hang with them, and that's Georgia. But to hold the Heisman favorite to what they did, and to hold this Lane Kiffin offense to 7 points outside of junk time, was absolutely impressive. And for me, I think Alabama made a big statement this weekend with this win.
Yeah, and understand, Lane Kiffin went for 3 fourth-down situations in that first half. All 3 of them failed. What did Nick Saban do? He went to 2 of them on 4th down, and they both turned into touchdowns. So, the mentor teaching the pupil, I guess, a couple of things in that game. But, hey, the easiest thing to say there, Alabama is a much, much better balanced team than Mississippi. Anyone that loses to Alabama doesn't mean that you're a terrible team. It just shows you how powerful Alabama is. But a team that really did play Alabama well surprised a lot of people this week by losing to Kentucky. Now, don't look now, Zach, but this Kentucky team is 5-0 in the SEC. So I mean, that was that 78-yarder or 76-yard the field goal that was blocked and returned for a touchdown. Definitely a big play in that game. Chris Rodriguez, I thought, had a great game rushing. He had a touchdown. It just was one of those games you say. And, it wasn't too long ago people were talking about, when is Kentucky going to beat Florida? It's been like 30-something games or whatever. But the last, 2 out of 3 years, Kentucky has beaten Florida. So now the tide is changing a little bit. Are you surprised that Kentucky was able to go in there and hold Florida to 13 points?
Not necessarily, because really and truly, something that people have been overlooking for Florida all season is the lack of a passing attack that they have. Emory Jones cannot throw the ball down the field, and it came back to bite them because all Kentucky did was control the line of scrimmage and stack the box. That's all they did. It was a simple game plan, and it worked very well for Kentucky. And also, Florida could not stop the run. As well as they played against the run against Alabama, Chris Rodriguez and this Kentucky offensive line had their way. And on top of that, Wan'Dale Robinson did what he did, being a playmaker on the outside for Kentucky. Will Levis didn't have the best game at quarterback for the Wildcats, but for me, he did enough to manage the game. And it was clear a Mark Stoops Kentucky team, the first thing they're going to try to do is run the ball. If you can't stop the run, he has no problem not throwing it. He played a whole season with a running back at quarterback 2 years ago. So he has no problem running the ball every play if you can't stop him. Florida, for me, just got they didn't play physical enough. Kentucky won the physical battle at the line of scrimmages, and Kentucky established their type of game. Florida isn't a grinded out, smash mouth team. Kentucky made it that type of game. Florida could not respond. And when the plays were needed, even though it wasn't pretty, Kentucky made the plays to win the game. So you've got to give Stoops and this Wildcats team credit.
Yeah, and also in this game, we were talking about one of the other games, 15 penalties for the Gators, a whole football field of yardage they lost, 115 yards on penalties. Well, you're not going to win if you're giving the other team 115 yards in penalties.
Yeah, especially on the road.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, give Kentucky credit. They're 5-0. I think they moved up to number 16 now. So it's got some teams out there that are really surprising us. A team that has surprised you and me this year, but in the other way, in the negative way, has been Texas A&M. I mean, Texas A&M going down to Mississippi State, 26-22. What was his? Excuse me. I'll tell you what. Will Rogers, man, I like him. I mean, I really, really like Will Rogers. But the only thing that Mississippi State, they don't run the ball. All they do is throw it. He threw 60 times. 60 times is way too much. 408 yards. Okay, listen to this. They had total yardage, 408 yards. Total passing yards, 408 yards. Excuse me. So you can see that they were throwing the ball at will. 46 completions, Zach, out of 59 attempts, 408 yards, 3 touchdown passes. And just, they were throwing it all over the darn place.
And it's weird because A&M's defense coming in was only allowing like 150 yards a game through the air or something like going into last week before Arkansas, they were allowing 77 passing yards per game. They're allowing just over 100 going into this game, and they got toasted on the defensive side of the ball. And it's weird how people keep sleeping on Mississippi State. Your head coach is Mike Leach, the mastermind of the air raid, and you don't prepare for the pass. It just doesn't click for me. And also, it's very clear that A&M is having an identity issue with Zach Calzada at quarterback after their starter, Haynes King, went down to that Colorado game. They have not been the same team that they were at the beginning of the season. And you can tell why King was the odds-on winner of that QB spot. And also, it just really, their offense has yet to establish a true rhythm since that injury happened. And what I think is doing is these quick 3-and-outs and a lack of consistency on offense is causing the defense to get worn down over the weeks because they're having to be on the field so much longer than you would like. And so what I think is happening is the quarterback uncertainty is affecting the offense, which is really hurting the defense. So it's like you say, if there's one bad grape, it infects all the grapes. That's kind of what's happened with this quarterback injury for Texas A&M.
Zach, let's do 3 quick rundowns on 3 other games that happened this weekend before Coach comes on. Boston College loses their first one to Clemson. This is a game that Boston College just couldn't get nothing going offensively. I mean, they only gave up 19 points. A game that, if they had a little bit more offense, and you talked about this last week. You said you didn't know how well Gasol will be able to pass against this Clemson defense. Well, obviously it wasn't good enough as Clemson won by 6.
Yeah, and that's what it is. Clemson is going to win ugly this year all year until they figure out something on offense. They're going to win these 19-13 games, these 20-10 games, these 13-10 games, because they know that with Clemson, if they score if they score 14 to like 24 points, they're going to win most of the time. because that's how good their defense is if it can be consistent. So with Boston College, they just, like you said, didn't have any answer for that defense. That defense was too athletic. You got to give Brent Venables credit, and right now he's probably saving this Clemson program with how good his defense is playing.
All right, let's go down to your team, Auburn, 24-19. Are you going to give Nix any credit yet?
He deserves credit for this weekend. I will give him that. I mean, he channeled his inner Johnny Manziel at times this season. He was the first touchdown where he ran all the way to the LSU sideline, all the way back to Auburn sideline, sidestepped a guy, and found the tight end on a deep post. You have to give him credit. He was a playmaker. He wasn't efficient passing, but he was a playmaker, and he made the plays that were needed to win the game. So Nix deserves all the credit, and Auburn wins their first game in Baton Rouge since 1999. I was 2 years old when that game happened. So it's a huge win for the Auburn program. Brian Harston proves that he's the guy for the job. This was one of the biggest wins of the weekend in terms of program-changing momentum for the Auburn Tigers this weekend.
Yeah, and I agree. Great win by Auburn. I think they're 4-1 now, leading into a big game, which we'll talk about later on in the show.
But big game's a statement. It's big game in name only, in my opinion.
But let's do this. Let's take a quick 15-second station break. And when we come back, we're going to have former NFL and college coach who's coached over 4 decades between the two. Ray Sherman will be joining us. We'll be back right after this. You are watching Frankly's. You are watching Frankly's Speaking Sports, live from Charlotte, North Carolina. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking Sports. I'm Larry Frank, along with your host, Zach Mckinnell, and it is my great honor, thrill, and pleasure to introduce to you former NFL and college football coach, Ray Sherman. Coach, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
I'm doing great. First of all, I want to thank you very, very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us on our college football show tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Coach, let me get right started with it. You've had the luxury of coaching a lot in both the NFL and in college. I want to start out by asking you, what is the, besides speed and size, what is the biggest difference between coaching at the college level and the NFL level as far as educating players?
Well, the one thing I found from being in college, you really didn't have a lot of time to, work with guys as far as, because you had classes, and then after the classes, then you'll get them, later on during the day, then you'll be able to work, the football aspect. In the NFL, basically you got a schedule and you got a lot of time to work with guys. And one of the things I found that you can take your time. You don't really have to rush through it and have to worry about them having to go to class or they have to other activities that they go to. So I felt that in the NFL, you have more time to spend with them as far as studying. Now, the other thing is because of the different rules in the NFL, sometimes you don't get that much time with them because, as far as the practice time, because you have so many hours that you can work with guys. And then because of the rules with the collective bargaining, you only have a certain amount of time to deal with the guys at the NFL level.
Coach, do you think coaches at the college level, let's talk at the college level a couple of minutes, do you think they do enough? Because I know only a certain percentage of college players go on to play in the NFL, but do you think the way they play the game and the way they teach the students, are they doing enough to get them ready so that if and when they get to the NFL, they at least can make the transition a little bit easier?
I'll tell you what, when you have a quarterback that has a lot of experience, you look at the Auburn game, and I mean, that was an unbelievable game against LSU, and what they did and how they won that ball game was amazing. I felt the quarterback was outstanding, and he put on a gutsy performance. And sometimes when you have a veteran quarterback, you probably can add a few more things. And if you look at Alabama and Georgia, I mean, to me, those are the two top elite teams in college football. They do an outstanding job. Both those programs are outstanding in what they do. And then you look at Penn State, what they've been able to do. And then you look at, you look at Auburn. Auburn kind of sputtered a little bit, but they found a way to win the ball game. So you look at Oklahoma, they're usually up there on top. And even though Oregon was up there on top, they lost to Stanford, but, they've done a good job at Oregon. So it's crazy. I love watching college football. I love what they're doing. And then when you got a lot of talented quarterbacks they're coming out of college and going into the NFL. And even though it's a little different for them in the NFL, because it's going to take time for these guys to prosper and get acclimated to the NFL game. Because I think about what Justin Fields said, in preseason, he said, "Oh, this is easy." Well, the thing is, in the NFL in preseason, they don't do a lot of different things. What they're trying to do is you try to find out what players are able to do, what schemes you want to do with these players. And so defenses, and they don't show a lot of different things. But when you get into the NFL and you get to the regular season, it's faster. It's the thing is they're able to scheme you and figure out what you do best, and they can take certain things from you. Like, for example, you look at the Dallas Cowboys. Everybody was talking about they threw 50-some times against Tampa. Oh, they can't do this. And then you look the next week, they blow you off the line of scrimmage running the football. So what happens is in the NFL, when they take something from you, say if you're a strong running team, you're going to throw that thing. If they take away the passing game, you're going to run it. And then you can mix in your RPOs and your quick game and your play actions and those type of things to give you a chance to have some success. And also injuries play an important part in what's happening. You look at what's happening with Tampa. Even though they're finding a way to win, they're struggling. They have some key injuries in the back end. And so you look throughout the league, when teams start having injuries, it's going to affect them. It's going to affect how they do. So that's why when you draft good and you get young players that can step in and help, that's a plus. But you gotta be careful with these young quarterbacks in the NFL right now, because it's going to take time before they can grasp what you're trying to do, what you need to get done. Because the regular season is one speed, the playoffs is another speed, and then the Super Bowl is another speed. So that's how it goes. And when I look at the players in the NFL, there's some talented guys, and I'm excited. I enjoy watching them now because it's fun to see the players perform, and it's fun to watch guys get better. You watch guys that have elevated their game. You look at the Patriot game and against Tampa, that was a heck of a game, and you can see that young man in New England is going to get better. Because he came from a program, is like a pro program in Alabama. So they got pros there. And then they just come to the next level and they're able to excel because they have great coaching. There's a lot of great coaching throughout college, but Alabama have guys that, first of all, they get the top of the line, but those guys are well coached. And when they get into the NFL, you can see how they progress and they can excel.
Coach, what is your belief when you're talking about these great quarterbacks that come out, like you were just speaking about Mac Jones, obviously, of the New England Patriots, and, we're seeing Trevor Lawrence this year. You saw Joey Burrows, just to name a few, last year, Joey Burrows. What is your opinion? Because, and I always ask, you're an offensive coach. I mean, you coach both sides of the ball, but you've been an offensive coordinator for many years in the NFL. Is your belief that when you get a young quarterback, do you think it's too quick to throw him into the NFL game right away? Or is it better? I mean, I know an ideal situation would be they can sit, learn on the sidelines from somebody else and capture, communicate and get educated there. But do you think it's fair for that young kid to go right into the Wolves right away, or should they be sat for a period of time before actually getting in a game?
I think it depends on the team, because I can remember back in the 80s when I was with the Houston Oilers and we were playing the Dallas Cowboys, and Troy Aikman was a rookie quarterback. And I'll never forget, we played him in preseason. and Jerry Glanville loved to blitz. So he was blitzing and hit Troy. I mean, Troy got hit. But after the game, I'll never forget, we were in the locker room talking, and we talked about how good Troy is going to be. And even Jerry said, he said, this guy is going to be special. So sometimes it depends on your situation, what you want to do. I mean, you look at Mahomes, he sat and he was able to do well. You look at Aaron Rodgers, he sat and he was able to step in and do well. But sometimes it depends on what your situation is, and if you can protect him, and if you got a good defense, a great defense that can help him, and you be smart in what you do with him, because you look at the quarterbacks now than it was before. They have all these 7-on-7 camps. That's all they're doing. These spread offenses, they're throwing a lot, and I don't know how many different coverages that they're going to see, but they're able, to spread the ball around a bit. And you look at Arizona with Kyler Murray. I mean, he is, people were wondering about how he's going to be, and look at him. He's phenomenal. I mean, he is a great football player, and he got a lot of speed. And so when you got a lot of speed and you could spread people out, if you don't have that defense that can slow him down or do things to confuse him a little bit, you can see what he's doing. He's been playing phenomenal. So I think it varies to your team situation if you feel that you have to play this guy right now. I mean, you look at the Jets. I mean, they hadn't won, and then all of a sudden, they win a ball game. And so that's the thing. It depends on if you are going to play them, you got to be able to protect them. You got to be able to help them. And that's what the Bears did last week with Fields. They protected him. He made some hellacious throws down the field. He connected with some big plays. And so you can see that, they did some good things that are going to help him. But I know Detroit is a little different than when they play Cleveland, and that's the thing he's going to face. He's going to face some tremendous defenses, and they've got to make sure that they do things to protect him. Use some max protection. If you have a tackle that's going to, have some problems, and get him some help. Chip, put the back to that side, chip. Or if you want to have to put a tight end over there to help out, you got to do things that are going to help him. Get him on the move where he's not dropping straight back all the time and getting KO'd. You got to get him on the move, throw quick, play actions, and run the football. And I think sometimes what happens, you got to run the football to keep people honest. Because if you don't run the football, they're going to just tee off and come after you. And even if you get a 1 yard, a couple of yards, you still need to run it to put the thought there, hey, they can still run the football. And I think if you do that, you got a chance to have some success.
Coach, you've coached, like I said, both in NFL and in college.
Mm-hmm.
If you had a choice and you had to pick one, which one do you – I know you enjoy both, but which one do you enjoy more and why?
Well, and I like the NFL. I enjoy the NFL, and I felt that when you have time to spend time with guys and really place your philosophy on with them and teach them a scheme. Because one thing I find in NFL, you've got to be able to give these guys something that's going to help them and be successful. And I always felt if you can't bring something to the table and that's going to help them, your time in NFL is going to be very short. So you got to be able to give them something. And then also you got to be honest with them, because these guys are smart. You don't want to lie to them. You tell them the truth. And when you're honest with them and you tell them why, and you lay it out why, then they'll understand. If you never communicate with them, you don't talk to them, and you get out there and do this, and sometimes go, Coach, well, what about this? No, you got to be able to listen to what they're saying. And that's one of the reasons why I enjoy being on the field, whether it's a play caller or coaching, because when they come off the field, you can look at their eyes and you can see that this guy is locked in. If they have a little foggy look in their eyes, then you know that it is going to maybe take a little time to get them going. So that's one of the reasons why I like the pro football game.
Now, you started coaching in 1974. I know that was said as a graduate assistant, and then you coached in college a while, then the NFL. Times have changed. I mean, we say that all the time about no matter what field or business we're in, times have changed. But more importantly, the people that you are coaching have changed. The way they handle things, the sensitivity of what you say and how it's taken. Tell us about, I mean, you last coached, I think it was 2019 with the Steelers, with wide receivers. What's the difference nowadays? What's the main difference you see now from then when you started?
Well, my coaching style hasn't changed. And one thing that I did, is I was really hard on guys in practice. You know, if I felt that we had to correct you, maybe 2 or 3 times, but I was hard on them in practice. And then in the game, I just let them play. If a mistake was made, I'll just say, hey, you owe me one, because I'll never forget Deontay Johnson was a rookie receiver that we got out of Toledo. And something happened in the game, or he did something. And so I came over there and started talking to him. And he looked at me, he said, you know what, coach? He says, you don't be hard on us during the game. I said, no, because I want you guys to be relaxed. I want you to be able to focus on what you have to do. And then whatever corrections we need to make, we'll do it during the game. But in practice, I've stressed certain things because it's important. I'll give you an example. We're getting ready to play Baltimore. And they got an excellent defense. They got a defensive back. God, dog, I can't think his name off the top of my head. Number 44. And during the week, and from coaching against Baltimore, I knew that this guy can punch the ball out. He will knock it out every chance he gets. And so that was one of my themes during the week. You put the game plan on Wednesday. I talk about him. I'm saying, hey, you got to make sure you secure the ball, because this guy will knock it out. He'll create a turnover. I talked about him on Thursday when I went over some rules and regulations. I brought his name up. I said, you got to watch this guy. He will take it from you. And I did. And the night before the game, when you meet as a group, as a receiver group, I pointed out again, protect the ball, guys. This guy will knock it out. So we played in Baltimore, and we ended up going in overtime, and the receiver caught the ball. He scored. The guy tried to punch it out, but he didn't get it because he tucked the ball away. And then in overtime, he caught the pass. He's running. Boom, he punched it out. And then they got it, and they ended up kicking a field goal in overtime to win the game. So I stress, when you have experience and you see things and you study a lot of film, you watch players, you got to be able to help them. You got to be able to tell them these are the things that you got to be aware of, because it can cost you if you don't focus on those little things. And that's the reason why it's very important that you got to protect the football as a ball carrier. You got to protect it. You got to keep, you don't want to turn the ball over, because when you turn the ball over, it can be disastrous for you. It can cost you a ball game. So that's the reason why I harp on just those little things as far as technique and fundamentals, because it can hurt you. It can hurt your team down the road. And that's the reason why that's important to me.
Zach, go ahead and jump in there, buddy.
Yeah, so you coached wide receivers for a long time, and a lot has been made recently about these new spread offenses in college not preparing wide receivers to make the transition to more pro-style offenses. So you have the Auburn offense under Gus Malzahn. You had the Georgia Tech offense for so long. That was a triple option attack. How, as a wide receiving coach, how do you give those guys a fair scouting comparison when maybe their route tree isn't as complex, they don't get as many opportunities? How do you scout guys coming from, I guess, unfriendly offenses for wide receivers?
Well, one thing you have advantage of in the NFL, when you have top receivers that you're looking at, you can travel to their campus. You can work them out. And what you do is you put them through a route tree. Can he run the routes that you want? Can he run the routes that you expect him to run if you have him on your team? And when you get those guys, you can tell if a guy's got the ability, even though he may not get those same skills in college. When you get them and you work them out and put them through different situations, you can tell if he's able to play. That's the reason why you look at Alabama, you look at all the receivers that they get, and they go in the NFL and they're able to prosper in the NFL because, one, the head coach understands what he needs, and also he's the next defensive backfield coach, so he understands. And then the other thing is that they have a scheme that fits NFL for them guys that go in the NFL. Now, sometimes even in the spread offenses, you got to still see guys like James Washington that we had at the Steelers. He was in a spread offense, but James was able to run all the different routes that you want. So that's why when you work guys out and you have a chance to look at them, and you'll know if they fit your system. And that's how you can tell. So it doesn't matter if he's spread offense, wishbone, whatever. When you have a chance to work with him and put him through individual drills, you know, hey, this guy has a chance to help you.
Right. And I mean, you've done so many, you've been a coach for so many different positions. When you're scouting a kid in college, What are the top, like, I guess, universal things you look for? Do you look for measurables first, then you follow it up with production? Do you look for can you kind of walk me through your process on scouting a player at some of these different positions you've coached?
Well, the one thing that I look at, I look at quarterbacks. When I had quarterbacks, I looked at them, and then what I would focus on is how does he take the ball from center? Does he have a quick drop? Is he slow in his drop? Can he maneuver? Can he get out of traffic? Can he, place the ball in a proper spot? Because nowadays you got to have a quarterback that's mobile and not just straight drop back. But you see a lot of these teams, even in the NFL, they're going to guys that can move a little bit and throw on the run. And so that's back in the day, though. It was drop back guys, drop back, 5-step, 7-step drop, and then you sit in the pocket, you work the pocket and throw the football. Well, the game has changed now. You got to get guys that are mobile. You look at Lance at the 49ers. You look at Russell Wilson. You look at, Kyler Murray. You look at these guys that are mobile. You look at Joe Burrow. He's mobile. He can move. You look at my guy at LA Chargers. He's mobile. He's moved. So you get those different type of quarterbacks that can do those things because that's what the game is going to. And then you look at the guys up front on defense. You better have a guy that can move unless you got some stout offensive linemen that can protect. Like Tom Brady, he's up in age, but you got to have guys up in front that can protect you and, so he can get the ball out of his hand. And he does a great job of getting the ball out of his hands, and he understands defenses, so he's able to get the ball out of his hands and go certain places. So it depends on, and that's what I see now with a lot of these Mahomes. These guys are mobile, they can throw on a run. And it's exciting, really, because I'll never forget when I was around Bill Walsh and I talked to Bill, and he was about, wanting guys that were mobile. And that's why when he brought Steve Young from Tampa Bay to San Francisco, I think people were wondering about that because he was a certain way in Tampa, and then he was a totally complete quarterback in San Francisco. And being around Steve had the arm, but he had the speed to get out of trouble. He can scramble, but he can also take off. And that's the thing what happens, just like at Baltimore, that guy is unbelievable. He's a talent. He's quick, and he really, did some good things against Denver this last week, and he can throw it, and he's going to get better. And it's funny when I heard some people said, well, we can figure him out. You can't figure that guy out because he can do so many different things that you better hope that you can contain him because he's a heck of a player. And I had a chance to see him in person a few times, and I tell you what, he's unbelievable. He's an unbelievable talent because they rely on their run game, but when people start coming up and trying to stop the run, then once he gets some of his receivers back and get them healthy, he's got a chance to get that ball down the field. So that's why it's a long season in NFL. But as you go, you're going to see some teams that are going to start rising up, and then you're going to see some teams that start going down, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And this is my last question. I mean, you played at Fresno State, and your alma mater has had a great year. I know they slipped up this past weekend against Hawaii, but but I mean, they were as high as top 15 in the country. Jake Hayner is playing amazing football at quarterback. For you, how great is it to see your alma mater have that type of success? And what do you see for the future of Fresno State? And how impressed are you with this year's team so far?
I've been impressed with them. I mean, they had a chance to beat Oregon, but they gave up some sacks and cost them. But they battled Oregon and they played very well. And then you see what they're capable of doing. I mean, against UCLA, they went back and forth and they pulled that game out. And then, they lost they beat Vegas and then they ended up losing Hawaii. But, I'll chalk that up. Maybe, you got overconfident, whatever. But hopefully, they can continue with the success. But I'm happy for them. I always, watch them whenever I can and watch what they, watch them play. And I'm really happy for them because it is a good program. And it was a good, even though it was years ago, it was a good program when I was there. But they have built on it. They've gotten better. They've gotten the facilities. And one of these days I'll get back up there. It's been a while since I've been there, but I'd like to get back up there just to take a tour, the campus and see what else has been happening there.
Coach, a couple more questions, then we're going to let you run. Let me ask you this. You've worked under a lot of different head coaches.
Yes,
in your career. Which head coach has probably taught you more than any other head coach?
Well, the guy that I really, and he's a defensive guy, but the guy that I really respect was George Seifert when I was with the 49ers. George Seifert is a heck of a coach. He was a heck of a coach. And I really learned some things from him. And I learned some nuances as even being on the offensive side of the ball, but he taught me some things on defense, that he introduced me to some things on defense that really gave me some understanding on why they do things and how they did them. So I really appreciated, what he did. And the other situation, I would say, in college, it was Vince Dooley. I enjoyed being around Vince Dooley when I was at University of Georgia and what he brought to the table. And, I still, talk to him from time to time, but learning and being at Georgia because the way they did things, the way they went about it, and it also gave me an opportunity to, as a coach, to coach at Georgia, but also I was a national recruit. I went everywhere to try to get, the best players I can find. And so that was a plus for me to be around Vince Dooley and George Seifert. And that was a positive for me.
Coach, when you look back at your career, and like I said, it's been a long career, do you ever regret, and I don't know if you've been offered or not, I know you definitely interviewed for some, but do you ever regret not being a head coach?
You know what? At one time early, I went through some interviews and circumstances happened that, I didn't get the job. And to be honest with you, I was a little bitter. But the thing that I did is I just kept on working and kept on coaching. And I got rid of the bitterness. I didn't worry about it. And I didn't worry about it. I said, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But the thing that I wanted to do, I wanted to make sure that sometimes you have to be the sacrificial lamb, and hopefully that somebody down the road can have an opportunity to be the head coach. So I was bitter at first, but after a couple of years, I wasn't bitter anymore. I just didn't worry about it. The one thing.
Coach, are you done coaching now? That's it? No more?
Well, right now, it would have to be a special circumstance for me to coach again. But right now, I'm good. I still work. I work with a couple of agents, and I kind of train their clients and down in Naples. So whenever those guys, when I get those guys, and I'll work with them. Work with the skill guys and quarterbacks and receivers and running backs, tight ends. So I do that. So that keeps me busy.
Well, that's good. Well, listen, Coach, want to thank you so very, very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us on College Football Tuesday show. It's been a real pleasure having you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, you be safe now.
Okay, you too. All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, that was Coach Ray Sherman. Zach, once again, another great interview with Coach Sherman. And, the interesting thing about him is he's had so much experience coaching at both levels. So you got to see both sides and telling you about quarterbacks, what they're like in college, and something that is no surprise to you and me. What school did he say is the closest to being like an NFL team? Alabama. And we've already said that. I mean, look at the receivers that have come out of, like he said, out of Alabama, or the quarterbacks, some of them that have come out of Alabama. Just great talents in the NFL, and that's a credit to Alabama. But let's go ahead, my friend, and start with next week. Let me see. There we go. Okay, and this game is these games are in no specific order of importance. It's just the ones I picked out to talk about. The first game, and I wanted to get your input in this because, a team that's not getting a lot of credit that really is playing decent football is the Maryland Terrapins. I mean, they're doing okay this year. Now, Ohio State 4-1 is playing home versus Maryland. To go to Ohio State, I know, is hard, and to win there is difficult. But how do you see this game matching up?
I don't even think it's close. I think Maryland, all their issues got exposed last week when they got blown out by Iowa. Iowa beat them 51-14. If I was putting 51 on you, you got major problems. Every time Talia faces an elite defense, it's a problem. And the thing about Ohio State's defense is they're stout in the back end. Their run defense is the problem. I don't know if I trust Maryland to run the ball. And then also Demas, the number one wide receiver for the Terrapins, is out for the year after tearing up his knee last weekend. So, and on top of the fact that it's going to be in Columbus, with Ohio State knowing they can't suffer another loss, I think Ohio State runs away with this one and possibly even covers that 21-point spread.
Yeah, and you talk about Maryland, gosh, to his brother, I can't pronounce
Talia.
Right, thank you for helping me there. He had 5 interceptions he threw versus Iowa, so that just tells you. Oh, that's an alarm here going off or something. But hopefully they'll get that knocked out in a second. But yeah, he threw 5 interceptions, so that's going to be a hard feat. But what do you think? The next game is a good game, a really good game. Can Arkansas, after losing that tough game last week where they got blown out, can they come back versus Mississippi?
I absolutely think they can. I think the matchup to watch is, can Ole Miss's front seven stop Arkansas's running attack? That's going to be the number one thing that's really going to determine this matchup. Arkansas lucks out. Vaught Hemingway can be an intimidating environment, but not at 11 a.m. in the morning. So I think they get a break there. They get their second straight 11 a.m. game. They're going to be looking to make a statement. And then also, can Matt Corral and the wide receiving unit bounce back after a pretty tough performance against Alabama? They got Jalen Catalon on the back end of that defense, and this Arkansas defense has played extremely well this year outside of the Georgia game. I think this is a matchup of strength versus strength, but for me right now, I'm actually recording this preview later tonight, but I think right now, if I had to put my money on it, I would say Arkansas squeaks away with a very close win in Vaught Hemingway Stadium.
All right, let's move on. The game of the week. My friend, can it happen? Will it happen? He says it won't. Georgia, 5-0, who looked unbelievable this weekend, is playing Auburn, who looked good too this weekend. But Georgia, such a tough team. Believe me, I'm rooting for Auburn. I'd love to see Bo Nix do it because I want to tell you, see, I told you he's not that bad. But the only way that I think Auburn can win this game, the only way is they got to force the young kid who looks like might be playing again this week, Bennett. They got to force him to throw the ball, which means they got to stop that unbelievable running game that was displayed last week. If they can contain that running game and cause him to throw the ball and maybe make a couple of what we call rookie mistakes, they may have a chance. But I'm pulling strings here. I'm just telling you what has to be done. That is a tough quadruple to go ahead and stop.
Yeah, I just don't see how it happens, man. When you look at the strengths of Auburn, it's the run game, and Georgia's front seven specializes in stopping that. And on top of that, Georgia's secondary is so talented. If Nix has to pass, I don't think the wide receiver is going to be able to get separation against this Georgia secondary. And on top of that, Auburn's front seven has experienced a lot of injuries, and I just don't trust them to stop the run game. I think Georgia's going to put on a similar performance like they did against Arkansas. I think they win this game fairly convincingly. If Auburn scores over 14 points, I will be shocked. Completely shocked. I think Georgia, it's a slow starting game early because Auburn's crowd's going to be in it. I can see it being like 3-0 or something like that after the first quarter, but I just think Georgia's too deep and too talented not to pull away late. Nakobe Dean is not going to let Bo Nix scramble like he did last week. And I just think in terms of matchups, this is the worst possible. I think Auburn matches up better with Alabama than they match up with against Georgia. And this is just a recipe for disaster for the Auburn Tigers this weekend.
Yeah, you look at this game, like I said, Auburn is averaging 238 yards rushing per game. Can that, I mean, we're going up now against one of the better defenses. Do you think they can, how do you think they would rush against that defense?
Well, a lot of those numbers are inflated by the 300 yards rushing performances against Alabama State and Akron. When you look at more of what they've done against other competition, last week they really struggled to run the ball until the fourth quarter. And in Penn State, they ran it well, but it was only to about 100 yards rushing. And I just don't think any of the front sevens that they have seen compared to Georgia's. Tank Bigsby's banged up at running back, which is a big loss for Auburn. So it's really going to fall on Jarquez Hunter and Sean Shivers. They just have to get their running backs out in space and let them make plays. And for me, I just don't know if it's going to be enough because you need a Tank Bigsby type player to beat a Georgia team and establish your running game. If Georgia makes you one-dimensional, they're going to run away with this game. And the problem is I just don't know if Auburn's going to do enough not to be one-dimensional this weekend.
Now, the game, what a lot of people are calling the game of the weekend, you mentioned this one earlier. It's Penn State, number 4, versus Iowa. And, something about Penn State this year, it's just been quiet. You know what I mean? It hasn't been, and I didn't put their record up there, but, they're 5-0 versus Iowa 5-0, but it's been, they're quietly winning, okay? And Iowa, like you say, keeps finding ways to win. I mean, this is could be a weird game. I mean, Penn State usually is known to have a good defense. I mean, we know about Sean Clifford, but I'll tell you the guy I like is Johan Dotson, the receiver there, is just tremendous. They're going to have to keep him from getting big plays. Iowa's going to have to. And I've never been a big, we make fun of him all year, you and I, Petrus fan, throughout the years. He's been sacked 11 times already this year. And that scares me. That scares me because I like Iowa, but versus a Penn State team, which is already a decent defensive side football team, they're going to be putting all different, formations against him, maybe some blitz. And the guy's been sacked 11 times. If he gets sacked like that in this game, it could be a long day for Iowa.
Yeah, I've already dropped my prediction on our channel for this one, so I can be, kind of candid about it. I think Iowa escapes this one. One, Kinnick Stadium is one of the hardest environments in the country to play. And Iowa plays a different brand of football when they're at home in Kinnick under the lights, and especially with the whole wave to the Children's Hospital, the environment's just different when they're in Kinnick. On top of that, Sean Clifford has historically struggled against good defenses, and this is the second highest graded defense this season behind Georgia. And they have been all over the field. When you look at what the two cornerbacks have done in Hankins and Riley Moss, you're talking about they are elite. Moss already has 3 picks and 2 defensive touchdowns this season, and Hankins is allowing almost no separation. He didn't allow a single catch last week against Maryland, who had one of the top passing games in the country. They do a very good job of running a very complex zone scheme, and they're just disciplined. They're playmakers, and for me, I think they forced Clifford into some mistakes. And the one thing is smash whatever the under is. I don't care if the under is under 20 points. This game, I would be shocked if either team scored over 20 points in this one.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that. And my question, because you keep talking about the Iowa defense, how about the Iowa offensive line? Can they contain that front 7 on the defensive side of Penn State?
The good thing is I think they can, because the way Iowa runs their offense is run first. So what they're going to do is pound the rock with Tyler Goodson, pound the rock with I believe it's Ivory Kelly Martin as the backup. They're just going to pound them and pound them and pound them. And once you're looking for the run and those D linemen are a little bit afraid to get upfield, they're going to hit the play action on you. And Petrus is going to throw it downfield. He's actually one of the highest graded quarterbacks in passes over 20+ yards down the field. He gets you to stack the box, and then he's going to go right over your head. I think that's the formula they use. And the other thing with Petrus is they throw a lot of short passes when he's in there. So what that means is he throws quick, he doesn't hold the ball long, and he doesn't put the ball into low percentage throwing areas, which means no turnovers, and which means he's going to get the ball out pretty fast. So for me, I think this Iowa team matches up very well with that Penn State defense.
All right. Now I got two at-large games, I call them. Good games, want to get your opinion on them. The undefeated Kentucky Wildcats are home versus the 3-2 LSU Tigers. How do you see this one faring?
I got Kentucky in this one. I think, being at home at 6:30 at night, Lexington is going to be packed. And also, man, the turmoil that's been surrounding LSU with Coach O, with the inconsistency, with the injuries to Derek Stingley and a bunch of key players. I just think LSU is in shambles right now. And last time they went to Kentucky was that 2007 year when they won the Natty with 2 losses. And Kentucky was one of those losses. They got a problem in Kroger Field. I think Kentucky is going to pound the ball right up the middle on LSU. And I think Will Levis is able to make just enough plays to pull out this one. I got Kentucky over LSU this weekend in Lexington.
All right, my friend. And then the last game on the list before you give me any other ones that you are thinking about. I know who's going to win this game. I just want to get some feedback on it. Alabama at Texas A&M. It is at Texas A&M, but to me, it don't matter where you play Alabama. They're that good that it's not going to matter.
I'm looking right here. There's 17.5-point favorites. You can double it. I think they're going to.
Is that absolutely? Is that? Let me ask you. Is that Alabama being that good, or is that Texas A&M not playing as well as you thought they would play this year?
It's both. It's Alabama being that good on top of, to beat Alabama, you have to have superb quarterback play. Zach Calzada is not bringing that to the table. And you're not just going to be able to run up the middle with Isaiah Spiller. And for me, Alabama is going to be able to keep this defensive A&M off their rhythm and off balance all game long. And I just see Alabama pulling this one pulling away in this one, to be honest. I mean, I'm not even covering this game on my channel because I think it's going to be that big of a blowout. I could see something of the tune of like 42-10, 42-13. I don't even think it's going to be a competitive game past probably the first quarter.
Now, as you look at the AP top 25, and for those of you folks that have not seen it, is scrolling on the bottom of our screen right now as Zach and I speak. Any surprises or any concerns about what you see in the top 25?
The one concern I would have to say is Ohio State being over Oregon. That, how are you going to put the team who lost to the team behind them one spot ahead of them? I know Oregon lost, but what has Ohio State done to be ahead of the team that they lost to? I don't love that. I also think Oregon and Ohio State should be behind the Michigans, the BYUs and the Michigan States, because
that's what I was going to ask.
Point. So that's the other thing I would look at. But for me, other than that, there's really nothing else that I would be freaked out about. I think you can make an argument Cincinnati could be in the top 4. But for me, the biggest thing is Ohio State being in front of Oregon is kind of ridiculous in my eyes after Oregon beat Ohio State in Ohio State's house.
Yeah, and Cincinnati, they just got to keep winning, and they'll be fine. Yep. They'll be there if they can control their own destiny. You just win, and you'll be fine. The things that you look at, again, I think Michigan's having a great year, a very surprising year. I mean, good to see for college football that they're back, but I agree with you. I was going to actually ask you that next about Michigan and BYU 5-0, and some of these teams, you even got teams in the, Florida is still in the top, number 20 or so? I don't know what number they are. I think number 20. I mean, I'm a little concerned that a 3-2 team is still in. I don't care who you play. You still got 2 losses. There's teams that are, when you look at Arizona State's 5-1, you got SMU that is 5-0, and I know they haven't played. And, you talk about the schools out west, buddy. Did you see who came in at number 25 this week? San Diego State moved in. So those teams out west are definitely making some noise this year in the college football top 25.
Yeah, it's good to see some of those schools get some respect. But, yeah, the 2 lost teams being ranked have kind of, got me questioning a little bit, but there's going to be bias because their losses now, now that Kentucky's jumped up, their 2 losses are to the number 1 team in the country and the top 20 team, and the combined loss, they lost by 2 to Alabama and they lost by 7 to Kentucky. So they've lost by a combined 9 points. And so I think that's what's keeping them in there. But I agree, keeping them at 20 is kind of tough, especially when you look at some of the 1-loss teams and undefeated teams still behind them.
And you talked about Oregon, and what was it? Somebody else that had 1 loss.
Ohio State.
Ohio State. You got teams like we said, Michigan. Michigan State's 5-0. They're playing. I mean, they're playing some decent teams. Some of these schools, I think they should be ahead. But you know what? Hopefully, it'll all pan itself out. As the season goes. But we should get a better taste again this week as these games are played. Any other games that I did not mention that might interest you some this week?
Oklahoma, Texas, always a big rivalry game. You got to check that one out. I believe that's a ranked matchup as well. And then also Notre Dame traveling to Blacksburg on Saturday night. It's a big one to go take on Virginia Tech. I really like that matchup. That could be an upset alert type game. And then also at the FCS level, Jackson State with Coach Deion Sanders. They're traveling to Huntsville to take on Alabama A&M and Akil Glass, who were the SWAC champions. So they were the 2 odds-on favorite in the SWAC. So that should be a great FCS matchup if you guys are interested in that.
All right, my friend. Well, listen, as always, great show tonight. Very informative. We want to thank Coach Ray Sherman for joining us today on College Football Tuesday. I mean, what a wealth of knowledge that guy has. And, I tease him if he's going to keep coaching. He's only coached 4 decades. Why not do a 5th, But great guest for us. We want to thank him very much. And we want to remind all of you that you can go to Zach. Why don't you tell them once again where they can see your previews for this upcoming week, the games, when you do individual games?
Yeah, you can check it out on YouTube. Just look up the Blue Bloods on YouTube. It's youtube.com/C / the Blue Bloods. And then you can also check it out if you're part of the Frankly Speaking Sports Facebook page. Frank share, Larry shares all of the previews on that page as well, so you can catch them there. And then you could catch like the overall audio version on any podcast streaming platform at the end of this week. So tune in for that too. But we dropped our first 2 today. We'll have 2 tomorrow, 3 on Thursday, and then 2 on Friday. So like daily college football content over there. So you can just find us on YouTube, the Blue Bloods.
And then tomorrow night, we will be on Frankly Speaking Sports with Frankly Speaking Panthers. We'll preview the upcoming game versus the Philadelphia Eagles, which will be a home game right at Bank of America Stadium. And we will have from Philadelphia, I believe it's Fox 29, sports anchor and Philadelphia Eagles reporter Scott Grayson will be joining us so we can break down that game for you all. But once again, we want to thank you very much for joining us on College Football Tuesday. And Zach and I will be back next week, same time, same place. Good night.